Hello, this one's gonna be an informative and fun one that's all about drugs. We must keep in mind two things throughout this video. One, these bad boys we're about to talk about are highly illegal in most parts of the world. And two, that there has simultaneously been so much misinformation spread about them. This means that there's a lot of relearning and researching that you and I have to do, since I like facts, and I hope you do too. But good news, I'm gonna do it all for you. So relax and grab a hot cup of your favorite sweet sludge as I tell you about my own personal microdosing journey. What follows will cover not just my personal experience over the course of 3 months, but also a look at topics such as the history of the war on drugs, importance of indigenous voices, legislation concerns, big pharma, and some other fun topics, and also relevant research since I am an academic at heart. So you might be thinking, oh my god, am I about to watch a video right now of someone just tripping out on mushrooms? No, absolutely not. That is like wildly against YouTube policy, and I don't know why you would think that. YouTube policy is also being heavily considered for this video. Microdosing is vastly different from tripping or macrodosing. And with psychedelics being a newer emerging field of research, there's a lot of cool studies that would explode your brain about their potential. So let's start on the same page, shall we? But first, I would like to say verbally out loud with my own mouth, with my own face flaps, nothing I am doing in this video, talking about or showing you is a promotion of drug use. I am not endorsing their use, encouraging their consumption, or attempting to teach you about how to begin microdosing. I'm not doing any of that. This video is here to educate you and inform you, the general public, on this topic, which you are most likely interested in, or you would not algorithmically be here otherwise. Now let's get on to it. Let's dumb this down a little bit. Magic mushrooms are an array of over 130 mushroom species, all naturally containing the chemical psilocybin, the chemical that often brings about hallucinogenic trips that you hear so much about. This is macrodosing, which usually consists of eating multiple grams worth of a specific strain of mushroom for specific effects. The psilocybin inducing these trips has historically been used for self-discovery, healing, and spiritual purposes around the world with respective indigenous folks in respective regions. Now, besides macrodosing, there is also microdosing, the practice of consuming very low hallucinogenic doses of a psychedelic substance such as LSD or psilocybin-containing mushrooms. The benefits include improved mood focus, treatment for alcohol and tobacco dependence, and end-of-life anxiety, more self-efficient tendencies, high creativity, some social benefits, while also showing possible cons of psychological discomfort and increased anxiety. Standard doses vary from 0.1 to 0.5 grams, but any measurement above 0.5 but below 1 gram is still debated as to what counts as a microdose versus a macrodose. Microdosing produces no noticeable effects in the mind or body, no noticeable high. This is known as the sub-threshold dose. If you feel a high, I don't think you're microdosing anymore. Dosing can be done on different schedules, with the two most popular schedules being the Fadiman protocol, named after James Fadiman, with 1 day of microdosing and then 2 days off, and repeating the system for 4 to 8 weeks, followed by 2 weeks of rest. The other is known as the Stamets protocol, after Paul Stamets, with 4 straight days of microdosing and 3 off, totaling a full 7-day week. Again, this is continued for 4 weeks, followed by 2 to 4 weeks of rest. The caps and stems also have different potencies of the chemical psilocybin, while cultivation and storage can also affect the chemical's potency. Now, have you ever wanted to know how the chemical psilocybin affects the human body through the use of boat metaphors? I thought so. So there's this boat named Sibin that is arriving to town Neuron. One day it's trying to dock at this port called Hot Tomato Arson, off of the coast of town Neuron. Following? Great. That was impressive. One hand. But there's an issue. Sibin, you see, is a square-shaped boat, and the Hot Tomato Arson docks can only dock circular boats. So workers in the area go, hey, how about we take our jackhammers and just chip away at the edges of your boat until you can fit into Hot Tomato Arson's docks? And you say, okay. Eventually, when all is said and done, they go, how about a rebrand? And you all agree on the new boat named Sin, the boat. You coast smoothly into the dock, offloading your cargo that the Neuron Town citizens pay a pretty penny for. That's actually a pretty good metaphor. The research being done on hallucinogens is all fairly new, and either comes from before they were made illegal in the 60s, which is highly outdated, or is slowly appearing from the 90s onwards. I'll say more about their criminalization and the war on drugs later. But we shan't brood on the fuck-ups of the government, lest we will find ourselves spiraling into an illogical pit of doom and systemic bullshit
white. It smells of racism and propaganda. And
but we shan't
brood on the and a lack of women's rights. And instead we'll focus on the myriad of research being done today. I feel like for a while now I've been noticing this growing interest in non-conventional Western medicine. There seems to be this worldwide paradigm shift, making people more conscious about what they wear, what they consume, companies they support, etc. And I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it's the growing concern for our environment. Perhaps it's the knowledge that we have and large fossil fuel corporations have a large impact on this planet.
Maybe it's that we're in an era of intense decolonization with a lot of unreasonable radical pushback. Maybe it's globalization. Maybe it's like one of those things. Who knows?
There's this cool thing research shows that psychedelics do to our cool little human brains, and it's providing understanding, compassion, and empathy that we are part of a global human consciousness. Global change is possible. Systemic change is possible. Veering off the path of climate change is possible. But you can't build a brick wall without the bricks. It starts with every individual. Every single one of yous.
Let's call this the inspirational section. I'm a genius. I'm gonna give you a little personal history so you know a little bit about me, why I'm doing it, and then we'll actually do it. Let's talk about why I'm doing this. My days consist of overthinking everything I have to do, or the things I've been putting off, or the things I told other people I would do and I have not done yet, until the anxiety leaves me utterly paralyzed and the emotion that I am completely disappointing everyone that I know, including myself, paired with a deep-rooted fear around my own potential, feeling like a fraud, even though I've accomplished amazing things in the 24 years that has been this lifetime, leading to me lighting up a joint to calm my nerves and passing out while Adventure Time plays in the background, pretending I just need another rest day and I can get some work done tomorrow. I'm so done with that. Being sad for myself. The issue with being very self-aware is regardless of how much you can see yourself sinking, like I was last year, if you're not equipped with the necessary tools to pull yourself out of the shit, you're kind of fucked. Therapy helps. Meds help. Talking with loved ones is something that I've realized helps immensely because you should care about yourself the same way that other people care about you. I feel like I blinked and managed to accomplish nothing last year, and I managed to beat myself up over it, which I'm also done doing because I know it's not helping. I am entering 2023 beaten, bruised, and bloody, knowing I need to do better for my mental health and my physical health. It's time to start recognizing your traumas, boo-boo. Let's get it f***ing started. How do I feel pre-microdose? I'm excited. I'm actually not nervous at all. It is currently 9:47 on, oh my god, January 5th. I am 24 in 5 days. I wish I would have done this earlier, but I was actually writing the script for this whole video. I usually stay up till like 6 a.m. So I really do still have a ton of hours in the evening. I have no expectations, which I think is healthy. I just want to see what happens. Let me get the tea. Whew, that's hot. I'll be dosing every 3 days. I've chosen to take it in tea form. I hear it releases the psilocybin?
About psilocybin.
Psilocybin. I feel like hot water isn't the best because just like how with green tea, if you pour boiling water over green tea, it'll ruin the leaf and turn it bitter. And I figured if there's active ingredients in this, I don't want to ruin them. I took a half a cup of really strong black tea and some honey. I've also been drinking a decent amount and I do smoke weed occasionally. I'm gonna be cutting back nearly completely on both. Here's to enlightenment, hating ourselves a little less doom scrolling through social media and gawking at the state of humanity. Cheers. That's really hot. How does it taste? Just like the black tea peach orchard. It has a earthy undertone. It's like you just pulled a potato out of the ground and just munched into it. This does not taste like dirty potatoes. I'm just gonna drink the tea. Should I like lick off the edges? I'm gonna be updating you guys after half an hour, then we'll do half an hour after that, then we'll skip to 1 hour. Leaf. I'm halfway down. Let's go, boys. I have to get rid of the negativity in my head. I love the taste. The texture between my teeth is delicious. It's extravagant. It's amazing. It's yay! I'm gonna make some food. I will see you in 30 minutes. It's been 30 minutes. I really don't feel that different at all. Maybe the only difference is I feel slightly more aware of my surroundings. 30 minutes ago, I was just kind of living with tunnel vision. I'm really hot and my house is not warm, so body heat increase, apparently. I feel maybe a little bit more present. I'm just aware of everything, but in a calming way and not like a anxious aware of everything. It's incredibly mild to the point where maybe I'm overthinking it, but from what I hear, microdosing affects productivity in a positive way. I'm gonna get some personal life work done, make some calls, answer some emails, whatever the adults are doing these days. I will see you in another 30 minutes. So it's now been 2 hours since the microdose, and it's been 1 hour since the last check-in. The one thing I noticed is I do have a tendency to doom scroll on Instagram, and one thing that I've been wanting to do a lot less of. Usually when I stop, it's because I reach a point of self-hate where I'm like, wow, you lazy son of a... Didn't reach that point today. Since I've consciously made that effort to be like, this is not good for you and you need to be doing better, I have done less of it. So I don't know if it's the microdose or not, but I was on my phone, I was checking some DMs, and I would go back to the homepage and just habitually start scrolling through reels. And it took me all of 2 or 3 before being like, I don't want to do this right now. It's doing nothing for me. I have things to do. And so for the next half an hour, I've just been so productive. I'm sorting through my thoughts as they come up, because one of my issues is having a ton of thoughts in my head and not knowing what to do with that info and when to do the thing that I thought of. So I'm writing down all the thoughts so I have them all logged, because that makes me feel sane a little bit. I'll check in before bed tonight. Otherwise, great first day. Bisous! I can't tell if it's the microdose or I'm just tonight I have some manic productivity episode. I don't know. Hello. It is currently 6:21 a.m. I didn't mean to stay up this long. More into the night, I was noticing the ability to sort my mental clutter a lot better, despite those same thoughts regularly being in my brain and causing me more anxiety, no matter how menial the work is going to be. So much of this is rooted in the way that my ADHD brain works, so it might not be applicable to everybody. But even though my brain was on go high power mode, that often comes in a manic wave and I'm left pretty exhausted after. And tonight it was very manageable, but I managed to get a lot done at the same time. My overall mood was happy and content, energetic, which is improved from what it usually would be. My physical state was overall pretty normal. I was a little bit more warm, and I found my heartbeat to be increased a little bit, just enough that I noticed it. My energy stayed pretty high. I needed some food. I made a chocolate cake, of all things. I'll give a brief update tomorrow and the day after. Tomorrow is a new day, and I'm excited. See you in the morning. Day number 2 at the very end, I had no time today to actually update. The second day was really good. I'm still considering if that first microdose was even large enough to have a decent effect on me. Today was productive. My mood has definitely been improved. It could be because of my overall excitement for starting this whole experiment. I think the real telltale sign is gonna show probably week 2 or week 3 if I'm still having that same feeling after the microdose, the day of, the couple days after, then it's not the excitement. I'll see you tomorrow for day 3 and see how it is. Day 3. Actually lies, it's day 4. I had no time to update you yesterday. Yesterday was a really busy day. I kind of feel some, not loss of motivation, but it's just a little bit less. I met up with some friends for breakfast or for brunch. Me and my friends talked about the microdosing. They had some other friends that had been through the same things. They were telling me their experience and really positive lights and other things that can come from it. So I'll see you tomorrow for microdose number 2. Bisous. It's my birthday on Tuesday in 2 days. If there's anything mentally that I have already noticed, I am so much quicker to notice where my anxieties are coming from and to minimize them a lot quicker so that they don't spiral. I had a very social weekend, so now I'm rolling into the week feeling wildly unprepared, which then in turn has a tendency to give me wild anxiety. In the past year, they've ended up in panic attacks or self-loathing situations where I just sit paralyzed for hours. I think noticing where my anxieties are coming from is something that I have already been feeling in the past 3 days. I will see you guys tomorrow. It is currently 1 p.m. on January 9th. I just took my second microdose. One of the things that I really was hoping that the microdosing would combat is the morning depression. I woke up with some residual anxiety from last night. My French press broke. I'm gonna go get a coffee. I'm gonna get ready. I'm gonna go have brain time. Bye! Good evening. We don't know exactly when microdosing first began, but the anthropological records know that native peoples of various traditional cultures have incorporated the use of psychedelic plants into their everyday lives for eons, including but not limited to peyote, morning glory seeds, psilocybin, African dream root, ayahuasca, DMT, marijuana, salvia, Rhea corymbosa, San Pedro cactus, teotihuacán, I think I said that right, lopo, ibene, kawashi, agaric, datura, soma, and tobacco, to name a few. Some historians even date the use of mushrooms back to 10,000 BCE through rock art images, which is like so cool. Just imagine a crayon in your hand, a blank rock in front of you, Mac DeMarco's Chamber of Reflection. You draw little shroomies on the walls, like what a life. Whether helping curate religious experiences at higher doses or at lower doses becoming aphrodisiacs, reducing hunger, nullifying pain, treating ailments like gout and syphilis, we aren't like pioneering anything new today. In the modern field of microdosing and the more broader scope of psychedelics, a very large number of experts tend to be white men, as they do in nearly any academic field, to be honest. I don't say this to discredit any of the effort that they put into their research, but everyone has biases. Any reputable scientist or academic would also agree with me. And to disagree with that is to disagree with the entire scientific method. So for those doing research in the area of psychedelics, they must be very aware of any substance's traditional roots. To a large degree, the academic research that I am seeing in microdosing is so wonderfully aware of these cultural histories and the people that hold those histories. I say that not neglecting that there are exceptions and, bigots and racists exist literally everywhere. If we want to progress in psychedelic research, we must do it hand in hand with those that have been using it for millennia, letting their voices speak first before our own, and prioritizing not only their stories, traditions, and experiences, but also the degree in which they want these substances accessible to cultural outsiders, i.e. appropriation. Now, it's time for me to take you on a historical journey of how we've ended up where we are today with psychedelics. In 1897, Western science was introduced to psychedelics through Arthur Hefter, whatever, isolating the chemical mescaline, which comes from the plant peyote, which is a tiny little cute cactus used for its hallucinogenic properties by indigenous peoples of Mexican regions. In 1938, while working under a pharmaceutical company, Albert Hofmann accidentally synthesized lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, but he didn't know it had hallucinogenic properties. An icon, a king, who was actually just working on making a fucking blood stimulant. Whatever the that is, I don't know, I don't chemistry. And he got LSD instead. Now this is a story all about how Hoffy's life got turned upside down. And I'd like to take you forward to 1943 when Hoffy literally accidentally tripped off LSD. So TLDR, he's cooking up in the stew one day, testing out his silly little potions with his silly little test tubes.
Wizard Money Gang, we love casting spells.
When he accidentally got LSD on himself. Silly, fun, quirky little thing about LSD is it likes to be a little sneaky and, seep in through your flesh, which the Hofster didn't know. And then the process of chemistrating got some on his skin. He then told his assistant he felt weird, he was gonna go home. His assistant goes, sick, let me just take you home so I know you're okay. And the rest was history. Hoff Daddy's bike ride home while experiencing the world's first ever LSD trip on April 19th, 1943 has marked the day International LSD Day. Conveniently a day before 420. In 1950, a Missouri study showed the first evidence that psychedelics provided potential benefits for schizophrenic patients, allowing them to delve into past experiences too traumatic to previously relive. Also in the 1950s, Saskatchewan, Canada, Google it, was home to some of the most important research at the time being done on psychedelics in the world, with therapies involving LSD and mescaline that would provide an alternative to lifelong sentences in asylums. In 1951, British psychiatrists Humphrey Osmond and Abram Hoffer prescribed LSD to 700 alcoholics and had 40 to 45% of patients treated. That same year, Dr. Sanderson in England turned the derelict and overcrowded Powick Hospital in Gloucestershire, am I saying that right, into one of the most revered facilities for psychotherapy in the entire world. Then in 1955, Powick Hospital was the first place in the UK to introduce full LSD therapies where studies show 90% of patients being able to access hidden traumas, with 65% of patients' overall conditions having benefit or somewhat improved. In 1957, Humphrey Osmond, the English-Canadian psychiatrist, coined the term psychedelics. In 1962, Sven
Johnson published a controlled trial to help treat alcoholism with LSD. 65% of alcoholics prescribed LSD quit drinking and refrained from drinking for the 8 months following. What were probably the largest pre-prohibition studies were done in Baltimore at the Spring Grove State Hospital, where 69 patients through a 14-hour psychotherapy session where they were given a small dose of LSD, microdosing. For the 6 months following, 33% remained abstinent from alcohol, while the controlled conventional rate was 12%. Months later, there was a follow-up study done with 135 patients, each randomly assigned to one of two groups: the high LSD dose group and the small teensy weensy little dose group. 6 months later, 44% of the high dose LSD participants recovered and 25% of the low dosers recovered from addiction. In the early 60s, two psychologists, Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, were working under the Harvard Psilocybin project. They let graduate students who were likely misinformed about what they were getting themselves into volunteer in their studies, until Alpert, that son of a bitch, gave a student LSD off campus. He was fired, all their work was halted, and Alpert went on to become known as Baba Ram Das, and Leary as an icon of the psychedelic counterculture. The 60s were filled with optimistic LSD research and other hallucinogenics, beginning in areas like terminal illness, schizophrenia, PTSD, heroin addiction, anorexia, and between 1950 and 1965, over 1,000 reports were published on the potential therapeutic effects of hallucinogenics. Ain't that wild? I also, at this point, don't believe that there was any research being done on microdosing. I'm fairly certain all that research comes from the 2000s onward, but correct me if I'm wrong and you know otherwise. I had to redo this part because my camera stopped filming, so now it's really windy and I'm sorry if that is bad on the mic. Because of people like Leary, LSD made its way out of the labs and into the hands of ordinary folks. The hippies, or those who were already politically involved in the counterculture movement, got wind of the transcendental properties of LSD, and recreational use went wild. LSD is said to make you question authority and societal norms, which was what this hippie counterculture was all about. They promoted sexual liberation, they disagreed with the Vietnam War happening at the time, and they were viewed as radical liberals, dirty, weird people. But Leary at the time was an icon for encouraging them to continue refuting social norms and not conform to a fucked up American dream. Now at this point, President Richard Nixon had branded Leary
the most dangerous man in America
and went into moral panic. And then in 1971, the Controlled Substances Act was passed, and all hallucinogenics, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, etc., were classified as Schedule I drugs, illegal and having no medicinal use. Campaigns throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s were basically propaganda, saying psychedelics cause your brain to bleed and you're gonna go crazy and jump out of a window.
I first dropped acid when I was 18. I was pretty jacked up on marijuana, so I decided to try it, and I dropped it. I put the hot dog up to my mouth and bit down. I realized that I had murdered it, and I took off screaming down the street.
Nevertheless, these campaigns had lasting effects on the societal understanding of hallucinogenics, and they scaremongered the general population into believing that they really didn't have any medicinal value. And it alienated and confused the fuck out of researchers that had been devoting their lives to proving that they literally did. Other countries would soon follow suit and criminalize all psychedelics as well. Now, to give you an idea of how fucked up Nixon's administration was around the war on drugs back in the 60s, there's a wonderful quote from John Ehrlichman, who fucking cares? White House counsel and assistant to President Nixon for domestic affairs. This was captured during a 1994 interview. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and black people with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. I'm not even gonna begin to lie. In the 1990s, attitudes changed. There was a small flurry of research being done on psychedelic drugs, picking up where others had left off decades before. 2 doctors received FDA approval for research, but the DEA made their attempts practically impossible in obtaining said drug. By the 2000s, obviously there was a lot of pioneering into the mental health space, and our understanding around mental health changed drastically to the point where a chronic illness would no longer end you a lifelong sentence in an asylum, that you would likely never escape. Fun fact about the 60s as well, we to this day know about the serotonin molecule because of the research and discovery of LSD back in the 60s. So what the fuck's happening these days, hey? Well, I'm happy to announce that it has been over a half a century, 52 years, since LSD and psilocybin were classified as Schedule 1 drugs. But even now, if the research is there in abundance, they are still classified as having no medical benefit.
I feel like I failed to mention that after the 2000s, there was a lot of research applications made for hallucinogenics. Just because they were Schedule 1, you would still have researchers and scientists saying, hey, I know this substance is like illegal, but like, can we just maybe have like a study or something done? Chill. The government would see these applications, they'd be like, sure, we'll give you like a little bit of leeway. So that over time, over decades and decades, since maybe the 90s, there are now many, many studies of modern research. I feel like I failed to mention this. It is gonna take a long, super long before they start to consider overturning laws having to do with drugs, which really sucks because they've been proven to have certain medicinal benefits. Goodbye.
Almost all funding has come from foundations like the Beckley Foundation, philanthropists like Tim Ferriss, and other private institutions. Which is why a lot of articles I've linked you in the comments down below require you to sell your soul and chop off your right leg and then pay $65 USD to like literally just access the article, which should be public access anyways. Academia. Regardless, now psychedelic research is absolutely skyrocketing, and we are in what many are calling a psychedelic renaissance. And hey, I want to contribute to this renaissance. Let me be your Michelangelo. Let me carve away the marble because I see the angel within you. Riz. I think we're in an era where we need to be questioning societal norms, pushing the continuous liberation of oppressed minority groups, breaking down political systems and structures that just do not work for us anymore. And frankly, they never did. We got to question authority, critique governmental structures if we want to have a better future in any way, which includes laws around maybe things like drugs. Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned you may jump out a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong. Oregon has decriminalized psilocybin therapy this year, and other places have as well. In differing degrees, there's San Francisco, Detroit, Denver, Washington, D.C., Seattle, a couple cities in Mexico, and some medical exemptions in Canada. Speaking of Canada, my home province, Alberta, Canada, is the first province in Canada to regulate psilocybin-assisted therapy. There's also the Netherlands, Thailand, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Jamaica that are all amongst those with progressive levels of decriminalization. Frustratingly though, legalizing mushrooms or various psychedelics doesn't make it easy to get your hands on them. There still need to be changes in some laws around the world surrounding distribution, possession, and proper medical access. Well, now that I've talked your cute little ear off about psychedelics and their history, we're gonna talk about the rest of my January experience. Slay.
The rest of January was rough. I don't want to get into the thick of it, but if you've ever struggled with mental health, you know that when it hits, man. I'm currently recording this in June, which thank God, because I can retrospectively look back and realize now at this point, December through February were 3 of the toughest months probably of my entire life. I hate to rate the eras of my life based on intensity of depression and mental illness, but it seems to be a good way to impress upon you all how mentally unwell I was. In January, my mental state was fragile. It was more scatterbrained than overcooked eggs. If there's one thing about this experiment that was apparent throughout January, it was that the bad days were much more manageable. So I want to highlight the 3 takeaways that I got from the month of January. First, and nearly immediately upon starting this experiment, I was able to separate the anxious, untrue thoughts from my objective reality. If you never learn to question the validity of the thoughts that go through your brain, you're just going to live in agreement with them whether they're actually true or not. Anxiety and mental illness can put you in a pit that's so hard to recognize when you're actually in it. If there was one primarily earth-shattering revelation that I made from these 2 months, and probably the whole experiment, to be honest, is that I could better identify when I fell into the pit, how long I'd probably been inside of the pit for, and then look for solutions to help myself get out of the goddamn pit. Second, I noticed I could de-escalate and understand my emotions easier. I'm grouping these together because they are truly so interrelated. I found myself these days, due to a multitude of reasons that I will not get into here, lacking an advanced sense of emotional intelligence with myself. I find it hard to identify exactly the emotion that I am feeling and also the intensity of that emotion. This can get in the way of external relationships, whether with partners or friends or family, but it can also get in the way of your relationship with yourself. Building up that self-understanding is critical, in my opinion, to literally any relationship. If you can't understand your own emotions, where they're coming from, and how to deal with them, how can you expect yourself to start to even understand the emotions of someone else? In January, when I would feel anxious, overwhelmed, angry, frustrated, I began to distinguish that specific emotion so much more than before. It was just a subtle identification, but the identification of it alone was a big step. For years of my life, any emotion I just felt made me overwhelmed, and I couldn't understand what exactly I felt in that moment until I reflected upon it maybe a day later, a week later, a month later. June now, and I'm looking back at January, and now I finally understand what I felt like. I came to the realization that this was a skill just like any other that needed so much training, and it started to mildly relieve some of my anxieties. I could notice them, observe them, see where they came from, start to understand them, and then begin to figure out strategies for getting through or around those specific emotions. Third, the last notable takeaway from January was that I actually got very picky with what days I would MD on. This is notable for a number of important reasons I want to talk about. If there's anything that a bad mental health does to my sense of consistency and routine, it's actually just throw it out the door and run a semi-truck over it. Doesn't exist. So instead of sticking to a strict schedule, I just thought I would start doing it whenever I felt ready that day, which was probably my first mistake. This ended up being about once every 3 to 6 days. That also went up to about 10 days. This ended up being about once every 3 to 6 days, and there was one point where it was like 10 days. I was trying, okay? I was in the gutter, man. Now, there's no significant change physically happening on MD days. Same time like there was. Forgive me for like the new age spiritual sounding words. Change in energy. I felt happier. Colors were brighter. I was much less neurotic. I was more attentive to everything around me, and my music taste was very specific on those days, and if I didn't adhere to that, I would get overwhelmed. And also, the objects in my peripheral vision were so much more noticeable, almost as if I was coming out of this perpetual tunnel vision that I lived my day-to-day life in. The reason that I think I was picky for MD days was I wanted to choose what day felt best to maximize these happy feelings. If I worked a 12-hour shift, maybe I shouldn't MD that day. I'd be wasting it for the hours I'm just caged up at work. If I slept in far too long that day and had a depression bed day, maybe I shouldn't MD that day because there's really not that many hours left in the day anyways. It's almost like I needed to be the most efficient with the good mood I was going to be put in, which I realize now is utter bullshit. That's also like not how medication works. I deserve to feel that happiness and relief from a bad mental health at any point in the day, any single day. If I would have stuck to a schedule as per the Fadiman and Stamets protocol call for, maybe the month would have been different. I don't say this out of regret because at this point now I have learned something. And learning is good. Side note, the conversation of being more efficient and sacrificing your moments of peace for your own efficiency because humans need to be efficient is frankly another conversation for another time that is also so deeply interwoven with capitalism. But I won't get into that here. So to wrap up January, I may have learned a lot, but that's only because it is now June and I am sitting here having processed it all. My days were 95% bad days, awful days, which is far better than the 99% bad days that I was having before. I was just beginning to start to understand how I could lead myself along the path of getting better. I wasn't yet walking down that path, but I could see the cobblestones, first couple of them, just appearing out of the fog. Now I'll keep February very brief. I want to get into active organizations and current research being done, which is the next section, which is such a juicy topic. First and most importantly, I actually chose not to MD for the month of February. Chose is an interesting choice of words that means 1, supply was low, and 2, I could take this as an opportunity to reflect on the previous month and also source better stuff. So here are my reflections. It helped. By February, I had noticed some of those mental habits that we just talked about actually helping me on the bad days. On the depressive bed days, I would have thoughts that would tear myself down internally saying, well, you're a piece of shit. But then I would go, who told you that's true? I would instantly go back to calling myself a piece of shit. But like the point is that I'm having these thoughts and questioning the validity of what's going through my brain. For the majority of February, I slowly started to understand what wasn't serving me, and slowly attempting to bring in routines that would help me and get me out of those cycles, emphasizing the slow part. My mental health was still fragile, just like it was back in January, but it wasn't until this moment in my life, I think, that I truly realized not only how much my untreated ADHD actually affects my day-to-day, just the degree of how unmanaged it was. I planned ahead for March, and I ended up with a much more professional supply of stuff that also contained non-psilocybin mushrooms and plants like ginger, reishi mushrooms, and lion's mane mushrooms. This is actually called stacking, the process of adding non-psilocybin containing ingredients to create a different effect on these empty days. I got a formula for energy, which claimed to support energy production and stamina.
And now, let's go talk science.
Before talking about myself some more, because I hate talking about myself, let's talk more about some cool shit being done. Speaking of shit, welcome to my bathroom. If you're thinking, Alexa, are you about to talk about boring science and I'm just gonna click off of this video? F you then. Click off. There are more clinical trials happening for psychedelics right now than any point in history. Universities, hospitals, and medical practitioners all over the world are studying psychedelic interaction with the brain, therapeutic safety, and efficacy in modern clinic contexts. Now, I won't go into the myriad of research being done on ketamine, MDMA, and LSD, but there's a lot of overlap in the efficacy of LSD and psilocybin, but effects do still differ substance to substance. A lot of studies that have been done in recent history are open-label studies where no knowledge is withheld from the participants. This is in contrast to blind studies where participants remain uninformed, leading to more unbiased and reliable results. Blind studies can be single blind, participants don't know what group they're a part of, double blind, both participants and researchers don't know what group everyone's a part of, or triple blind, the third eye is closed, where a third party like authors or data analysts are also not in the know. But to give you an idea of where current studies lie, let's run past the last couple decades. In the 2000s, a study conducted with psilocybin shows that the main effect of the psilocybin chemical was actually to decrease blood flow to certain areas of the brain that seem to be overactive for depressed people. Some other methods of combating depression also show the same effect of decreasing blood flow to these certain overactive areas of the brain. In 2006, 9 patients with treatment-resistant OCD were given 3 different doses of psilocybin. There was a reduction in their OCD symptoms and no adverse effects recorded, although the study was stopped short due to a lack of funding and costs incurred for these studies being fairly high, which is very common in studies with psychedelics. In 2008, a hugely influential experiment took place under Johns Hopkins University. Non-psychiatrically ill volunteers were given a dose of psilocybin. Then they were followed for many years. Many said it was one of the most significant experiences in their entire life, with positive outcomes lasting for years. In 2011, a volunteer group of mostly women, all with advanced cancer diagnoses, were given moderate doses of psilocybin and placebos in a double-blind study, with enormous positive results on their end-of-life anxiety. In 2014, Johns Hopkins performed an open study for tobacco addiction, administering psilocybin on 3 separate occasions. 12 of 15 subjects were smoking-free after 6 months. In 2015, a study on alcohol addiction was done at the University of New Mexico, with similar positive results. In 2016, a very influential study with psilocybin's effect on major depressive disorder was published. Results showed maximal effects at 5 weeks, and with a 6-month follow-up showed highly significant improvements. But since it was an open-label study, interpretations are limited and hold a higher potential for being biased. Through 6 different studies between 2015 and 2017, all claimed that microdosing is thought to provide a potential boost in cognition. Another study showed psilocybin decreasing the effects of anxiety and depression that often accompany a life-threatening diagnosis. Afterwards, it's seen that patients are much more able to come to terms with the inevitability of their death. With the modern practice of medicine being so preoccupied with sustaining life and labeling death as this one big defeat, it seems like psilocybin is calling for a change of perspective. It's inevitable, it's going to happen, so you might as well make your peace with it to make that diagnosis just a little bit easier to handle. In 2019, the FDA approved esketamine, which in lower doses is not only a psychedelic, but also helps treat depression. This is not psilocybin related, but it's really just like a cool fact that's drug related. And also in 2019, MDMA-assisted therapy was actually proven to be an effective catalyst in one study for autistic adults with intra and interpersonal change. Here's a couple of other really nice quotes from research conclusions that I really liked. The potential for respectful and controlled use of psychedelic drugs taken in community settings in modern society is recognized to have potential benefits for public health. Next one. Psilocybin was found to improve divergent thinking and critical processes involved with creativity and enhance participants' well-being and emotional empathy. I could keep going on and on and on about the current research that is happening, but frankly, even with me summarizing that would take up far too much time, and I have barely touched the proverbial research iceberg here. I'm just skimming over some of the more important and broad studies that have influenced where we are at today. From all of the studies that I am seeing, those larger studies that are influencing our way forward, there seem to be limited adverse effects. These adverse effects could be counteracted through monitored and regulated consumption. The glaring exception, those with a genetic predisposition to things like schizophrenia or other mental illnesses. I won't go into the research here specifically because I want to stay more on topic, and this is something that I am not fully educated on, but there are newer studies that are now out that indicate that your use of these psychedelic drugs could trigger the onset of your predisposed mental illnesses. If you are predetermined for anything in this vein, I 110% would suggest that you look into it. Educate yourself. I want to talk about bad trips. I could go on a whole tangent about why I don't think bad trips are actually bad trips, but that's not the topic for right now. But there's a reason that you always hear people talk about bad trips. These aren't clinical trials people are participating in with a guide to help them coach them through their feelings as they come up. They're not at an ayahuasca ceremony in the middle of the Amazon jungle, surrounded by healers with 12 plus years of experience. Some curanderos have 15 plus years of experience and train their whole lives to take people through that process. But no, it's 5 friends all doing LSD with no sober person that's informed of how to guide themselves through their emotions. This is what making drugs illegal does also.
That's my opinion!
While we are talking about microdosing in this video, it's worth noting that a trip is very dependent on your attitude and also your environment. Let's stay on topic. Many facilities around the world are leaders of their own paths for psychedelic research. The University of Toronto Center for Addiction just received their first federal grant to study the active ingredient in mushrooms, psilocybin, in microdose amounts, and then assess how it fares for people that are previously resistant to any treatment for depression. Johns Hopkins University is one of the leaders for psilocybin research and is backed by around like $17 million in funding and is constantly focused on progressing their research. Just back in January 2022, last year, that psychedelic treatment relieved symptoms of major depressive disorder in adults for months, and in some cases, years. This is a study, you know, like that, it was concluded. It helps. MAPS, or the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, mouthful, is a non-profit organization specializing in research and education developing medical, legal, and cultural shifts so people can benefit from careful use of psychedelics and marijuana for mental well-being and connection. Other nonprofits like Therapsil are helping Canadians legally access psilocybin for medical treatment. On and on and on and on. Again, I'm like not even touching the iceberg here. I'm just trying to help you understand where we're at currently. I'm gonna give you a full list on screen, please pause to read, that are paving the way for psychedelic research. Like, look at all that. Look at all that. Microdosing communities are growing around the world exponentially, and to be honest, the research is still just beginning. Those paving the way forward are most genuinely usually Indigenous communities that have been using microdosing methods for so long, and you know, Western medicine just hasn't fucking stolen yet, to be honest. Let's hope we can keep it that way. If you want to stay up to date with emerging info, studies, the science of not just microdosing but psychedelics in general, I would recommend the Double Blind Mag, which prints biannually on progress with psychedelics around the world. And if you have Twitter, which I know you have Twitter, stop. There's no way you're on Threads. I would recommend following the Chacruna Institute, MAPS, Johns Hopkins University, Psychedelics Today, because there's a lot happening right now. Let me just veer off really quick because there's this really cool snippet of information that I had no clue where to fit it in, but it's so cool and I need to include it. And it's about tryptamines. All mushrooms, even the ones that are non-psilocybin containing and don't make you hallucinate, they repair your brain neurons and stimulate new neuron growth. Like, that's so cool. This is called neurogenesis, which is a process that previously was thought to only happen as a embryo or fetus is developing in the womb. For so long, the circuits in our now adult brains are believed to be fixed, closed, fully wired and fully set. Dunzo. While many animal species show potential for neurogenesis and this plasticity, mammalian brains were thought to be different and fixed. Alison Gopnik at Berkeley University is an expert that you can look further into if you want to know more about neurogenesis. Okay, you think that's cool? When stacking different mushrooms, there is what's called a greater arithmetic predicted effect. Arithmetic? You know what I'm saying. Which means if one mushroom increases neuroplasticity by 10% and another mushroom increases neuroplasticity by 10%, you would think together they'll increase neuroplasticity by 20%. You are wrong. Studies aren't showing 20% increase for neurogenesis. They're showing numbers like 36. Abadam cookies. So by combining and stacking different mushrooms that aren't even psychoactive, all containing these different tryptamines, you can more or less rewire your brain, produce new pathways, which is exactly the thing that makes kids so good at learning. They are producing those pathways. Neurogenesis was finally taken seriously in the 90s and is now a rapidly evolving field. In conclusion, we're living in a very cool scientific age. The psychedelic renaissance.
Now we go on to March. The first day I tried these new pills. Wow. To say the least. Strain, hair of mushrooms, and packaging. Now I know truly matter. I made sure to wake up early enough so that I could have a nice morning. And this day was odd in so many ways. I want to take you through that first MD day. I did have things I wanted to get done, and I forced myself out of bed, which can be, at this point, is incredibly hard. Starting your day and doing any kind of morning routine. I was just starting to do routines and stuff, which thank God. If you don't have morning routines, what are you doing? Make routines. By the time I was bed, clothed, washed, and decently put together, I could start to feel a change. The March microdoses were slightly more intense than the microdoses of the months prior, and MD days were truly amazing for the entirety of this month. My first unordinary occurrence was me changing my plans on a whim and sticking to it. One second I had my day fully planned out, and the next I came up with a new idea and completely rerouted the entirety of my day. The unfamiliarity of schedule changes leaves me on very bad days anxiety ridden and shaken. Anytime anxiety appeared, I'd be like, I got it, I'm good, don't worry. Take a seat. You could sit down for this. I am the captain now. The second unordinary occurrence was my lack of procrastination the entire day. I don't think I am better at anything in this life than procrastination. Correction, I don't think I was better at anything. It is August 1st and I am taking so many steps to be better, and this year has been hard. This was the first time in a long time that I wanted to do things, and I ended up at the wrong post office on the last day of pickup, which meant the next day it would be returned to sender, which normally would have given me massive anxiety. Not only was I completely unshaken and remained in a fantastic mood after that, I can't do anything about it, I guess. Why worry? Then the package just arrived at my door the next day, so problem solved. Any tingle of stress I had was easy to navigate, torn down by my own logic. I viewed every anxiety that came into my brain like a math equation. If I just figure out where it comes from and figure out why it's not valid, it won't be there anymore. The next unfamiliar occurrence was that with music. I previously stated that I was picky with my music on MD days, but never to this degree. Whether I'm on a busy street or I'm catching the metro, I'm always listening to something that is upbeat and gets me in a good mood. The city was so much traffic, sunlight, people walking, cars. I had to turn on the Skyrim OST by Jeremy Soule. Skyrim Atmospheres. It is nature ambient noises for an hour and 47 minutes. And I listen to this song a lot because it helps me wind down, but the fact that I'm listening to it while walking through the city, odd. The next thing that happened, I was planning on going to a Muay Thai class. When it comes to making split-second decisions, ruining the quality time I was spending with my sister, or determining what's best for my physical health, I don't like any of those three. I don't want to do them. So I proceeded to sit in silence for 5 minutes, logically pondering what was my best option. I spoke critically to myself, unswayed by any emotion that resembled that of a 12-year-old stomping their feet. I packed
packed up and went to Muay Thai convinced that it would be the better option. Then another unordinary occurrence. This was the most enjoyable Muay Thai class I have ever taken in my entire life. I was connected to my purpose for wanting to be there. I was determined not to slack in any of the drills and was incredibly conscious of how to regulate my breathing so I could get the most out of this exercise. This was also the most sore I think I've ever been in my entire life. Such a good sore. Afterwards, I went to a restaurant, sat down, and had a healthy meal by myself, which I would usually have not done because sitting alone like that would have brought me anxiety. This was only the first day that I had been trying out this new supply, but my symptoms had changed drastically since my previous microdoses. For the duration of this month, I also noticed these changes. I would feel slightly more out of body, not in a bad way, but just more observant of myself. People were far more interesting and also easy to talk to. And I'm so focused on what they're saying that I miss what they said and can't remember things and can't even contribute to a good conversation. So basically, the ADHD symptoms were just milder. It's what we're gonna call that one. Messaging and responding to people through phone calls and text was so much easier. I know I'm not the only one that gets anxiety when I see a message pop up. Do I respond now? Do I respond later? I need to look? I feel like I can't respond. I need to think about it for a second first. Just respond. Definitely more energy. So much more energy. I could identify my emotions as they were happening and not just as they were overflowing. I was able to handle more on these MD days than I was on usual days. If you've never heard the analogy for spoons to describe how much energy you have in a day, let me enlighten you. Let's say you have raging ADHD and you wake up and think, I only have about 5 spoons in me today. You then do laundry, which takes up 2 of your 5 spoons, and then also decide, well, I have to do the dishes, and that takes up another 2. You are then left with 1 spoon, and once that spoon is used, you feel overwhelmed, burnt out, and drained. Usually this kind of stuff affects people who are not neurotypical and suffer with things like ADHD or varying forms of mental illnesses. That first MD day in March was an ambitious day. I changed my plans. I met my sister. I picked up a package. I went to Muay Thai. Got a lot of work done. I got personal work done. I got editing work done. I went for dinner on my own. I came home. I cleaned that never happens. Days like that never happen. Now, as much as you're thinking, Alexa, tell me more about how much milk you put in your cereal and what the temperature of your water is that you boil when you make tea. I shouldn't. I can't, and I won't, because I'm going to tell you about Big Pharma and commodification. I really wanted to change the scene for this one, but frankly, I'd really like to get this video out, and I'm very tired, so I'm going to do it sitting right here. Psychedelics were outlawed for a reason back in the 60s. I'm not saying the reason was just or well-informed. While they were very much abused by the public, there were political leaders with a non-progressive, fucked up, racist agenda that had the big red button that they could push to do whatever they wanted to do. The criminalization of psychedelics and other drugs came at a time where systemic issues and social injustices were heavily being called out and people wanted change. Being aware of the largely flawed systems around them and wanting better under a system that doesn't want the same thing. Woke, for lack of a better term. Thus, psychedelics were outlawed completely. Now, the issues I think we're facing today is an amalgamation of unlearning previous propaganda from that era, which has been so socially normalized, though also now coupled with Big Pharma trying to overtake it as an industry, kind of like they did with cannabis. And not just those, but also fighting against a larger ton of systemic issues in which the people are trying to get real legal change to happen. In the history of Big Pharma, there aren't many occurrences where they care genuinely and deeply. It's just a big money game. And that's because when there's one substance that can benefit people with multiple disorders and illnesses with just one dose, that takes a lot of money out of their pockets. So we must be on the lookout for any infringers upon mushroom rights. I do believe the corporations that handle pharmaceuticals in this world have done good. Now you might think, oh my god, but today is so much better and the government would never control things like that.
Once research is now picking up again decades later and it's totally different nowadays.
Girl. I don't think optimism or skepticism are ever bad things. Remaining hopeful and also remaining vigilant should be going hand in hand. So we should be aware of the governmenting, i.e. a majority of the time not being there for people's interests, operating under old traditional ideologies, and letting money or political drama rule legislation more than the wishes of the public sometimes, most times.
most times, when the big, bad, rich 1% finally decide to sit down, I propose we ought to converse about commodification can potentially pose a threat to indigenous rights to use these medicines. Look into peyote and ayahuasca. But this also means that we risk over-harvesting some very carefully curated crops, which would then limit the access to those who need them for spiritual or religious purposes. And 2, what ethical consumption actually looks like, because it exists.
Congratulations, this is the end of the video, and I have 2 prizes for you. One being this trophy, wherein you witnessed the 7 evil haircuts of Alexa. Enjoy. Secondly, may I present to you, dedicated viewers, a full comprehensive list and a wonderfully looking Venn diagram of my complete symptoms, the pros and cons of each, the overlaps of the physical, the social, and the creative aspects, and everything that 300 days of microdosing did for me. I formed habits and systems of productivity and also a ton of day-to-day routines. I've figured out what makes me feel taken care of, what gets rid of my anxieties, when to push myself, when to be gentle with myself. A very large one was how it helped me come to terms with the full extent of how ADHD affects my day-to-day life. I started to view the world as beautiful chaos that I got the opportunity to sort through and organize on my own terms. I felt so much less stressed when I figured out the methods and the things that worked for navigating my own personal mind maze.
It's like laser tag up there.
I now enjoy the process of things. I'm not just rushing to the end goal. I now know how much organization keeps me happy in every aspect of my life. And I'm endlessly learning about the methods of organization that are working for me. I finally view the education of my own brain and learning how I tick over just the self-judgment of existing as I am. Finally. The way you function is the way you function. What are you going to scream at a hammer because it can't wash your dishes? Stop talking to yourself like that. Would you talk to your friends like you talk to yourself in your own brain? You'd have no friends. Very, very important. Routine consistency, routine consistency, routine consistency. And even when you feel like you just don't want to do it, it's the last thing you want to do on earth, routine consistency, baby. Do the goddamn thing. I'm glad I started MDing when I did. My health care situation was complicated. I did not have easy, affordable access to many services. And also the healthcare sectors for just generally making things like wildly inaccessible. I didn't realize why this video had taken me so long to make until about August, when I found myself watching the footage over and over and over again, trimming it down to be digestible from areas of my life that I just was not... I didn't want to watch that again. It has been one hell of a learning experience. It has. Lastly, there were many concepts in this video that I did not have time to include, or this would have been 3 hours long. If you have any updated research, articles, research papers, websites, Twitter feeds, YouTube videos, links to comfortable fuzzy socks, because I just can't find any that don't like flip on my foot. And it's annoying when you're wearing them because you're trying to relax, but then it's like you walk around for 5 seconds and like the heel is on your ankle and you're like, why? You know, it's probably because I buy them at the dollar store. Please use the comment section and share that down below. All resources that I've used will be listed below in the caption. And if you stayed till the end of this video, thanks. Reminder that tomorrow is what you make of it. Intention is nothing without action. And life is just a video game.